From the Sky News Centre at 9, Holly Willoughby's thanked the previous victims of a man now convicted of plotting to kidnap, rape and kill her, praising their bravery in speaking up. It emerged during a trial that Gavin Plum, aged 37, had preyed on women before and has convictions for attempted kidnap and false imprisonment. A jury dismissed his defence that the plans were merely a fantasy. His neighbour Joanna says he was fairly anonymous.
We'd hear conversations occasionally in the garden, unusual conversations that I thought would reference gaming and all that, and I thought that he was sort of building a gaming forum. You didn't think at the time there was anything untoward until sort of this all came out on the news.
A former teacher has been jailed for 6.5 years after having sex with 2 teenage boys. Rebecca Joynes wept as she was sentenced. The judge said she'd shown breathtaking arrogance. Senior official in the US government says there's been a breakthrough over the potential release of Israeli hostages from Gaza. Head of the Mossad intelligence agency, David Barnea, is reportedly heading to Qatar to resume talks. Royal Navy warship, the HMS Trent, is being sent to offer support in the Cayman Islands as Hurricane Beryl continues to tear through the Caribbean. The storm is heading towards the coast of Mexico after causing damage in the region. Sport, and there's been heartbreak on centre court for Andy Murray, who's crashed out of the men's doubles in the first round. The former world number one was partnered alongside his brother Jamie in what he said is his last Wimbledon.
Obviously, it was a bit of a race against time to try and get out here, and physically wasn't easy today. But I'm glad, we're able to get out here and do this one time together.
But this wasn't his final appearance. He's playing alongside Emma Raducanu in the mixed doubles later this week. And finally, a koala sanctuary in Australia is banning cuddles with the creatures over fears they're getting stressed. Campaigners have warned the encounters are harmful as they interfere with the animals' need to sleep for up to 20 hours a day. That's the latest. I'm Chris Milligan.
From the Sky News Centre at 10, breaking news. Labour is on course for a landslide general election victory, according to the broadcaster's exit poll, which has just been released. As official counting gets underway, the Ipsos UK poll for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News is predicting Sir Keir Starmer's party will win 410 seats and the Conservatives well behind with 131. The numbers suggest he'll become Prime Minister with an overall majority of 170, which would fall just short of the 179 Tony Blair secured in 1997. The Liberal Democrats are forecast to win 61 seats and the SNP 10, while Nigel Farage's Reform Party is predicted to win 13 seats, although analysts say that figure is highly uncertain. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, says a Labour win would be extraordinary, given Jeremy Corbyn's record defeat at the last general election.
People thought Labour might be locked out of power for a decade. Sir Keir Starmer himself said he had a mountain to climb. Well, tonight he stands on the cusp of becoming only the 4th ever Labour leader to win from opposition.
The Labour leader needs to win in 326 of the UK's 650 constituencies for an overall majority. Manchester Mayor and former Labour MP Andy Burnham says there'll be a lot of nervous candidates right now.
You think, are people actually going to go out and put a cross by my name? And it's hard sometimes to believe that people are going to do it. So all day you just have this mad worry about the weather, or something else, and then something else. But then finally you get to the count, and that's when it's all right.
Security guard Gavin Plum's been found guilty of plotting to kidnap, rape and murder TV presenter Holly Willoughby. Andy Murray and his brother Jamie have been beaten in the men's doubles at Wimbledon. And just to recap, the broadcaster's exit poll is suggesting Labour's on course for a landslide victory in the general election. That's the latest. Time, Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 11. Vote counting's underway in the general election, with the exit polls suggesting Labour's won a landslide victory. Sir Keir Starmer's party is expected to have won 410 seats, equating to a majority of 170. It ends 14 years of rule by the Conservatives, who'll win just 170, according to Ipsos UK for Sky News, the BBC and ITV News. Speaking from a rainy Manchester, the Labour Deputy Leader, Angela Rayner, said the exit poll is encouraging.
Keir has done a tremendous job in transforming the Labour Party and putting forward a programme for government that the country can get behind. And after 14 years of the chaos we've seen under the Tories, I think they're getting, punished for that.
Some big-name Conservative ministers could fail to win back their seats, with Penny Mordaunt, Grant Shapps and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt among those vulnerable. However, former leader of the Scottish Tories, Ruth Davidson, says it's not as bad as the Tory head office had been predicting.
There's no dressing this up. This is a massacre. It is a massacre. They've actually, if this is right, pulled a few back from where they thought they were.
The Tory party says there's a long night ahead before the results are known. But former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland's urging his party colleagues against rushing to apportion blame.
I think the time for recrimination is not now. I think a lot needs to be looked at in terms of the cumulative build-up of events that led to this whole-scale rejection of the Conservatives.
The exit poll also predicts 61 seats for the Lib Dems and just 10 for the SNP. They could be overtaken by Reform, with the polls suggesting they'll take 13 seats, although analysts aren't certain about that number. It also suggests, despite the big majority, that Labour's vote share is down compared to 2017. There are no official results in yet, but the first could be declared in the next hour. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at midnight, Sir Keir Starmer looks on course to become the new Prime Minister, taking a landslide general election win. The broadcaster's exit polls suggesting his party will claim 410 seats. The Tories are predicted to see their numbers in the Commons slump to just 131. Some of the Conservatives' most senior figures are also predicted to be voted out, including Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps and Leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt. Conservative candidate Dr Ben Spencer admits the exit poll doesn't look good for the Tories.
Once we get more constituencies through to get a better sense in terms of what's going to happen. But obviously, as things stand, it's a very disappointing result, and it's going to put Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner into power, and all the consequences that's going to have.
The first seat's been declared in the last hour, and it's gone Labour's way.
I am ready to declare the result for Horton and Sunderland South. Bridget Maeve Phillipson, 18,837.
Reform UK came second with almost 30% of the vote. Here's what the Shadow Education Secretary had to say after the declaration.
If the exit poll this evening is again a guide to results across our country, as it so often is, then after 14 years the British people have chosen change.
Labour also held Blyth and Ashington. Our data editor Ed Conway says despite the big predicted majority, the exit polls raises questions about Labour's support.
Looking at the share of the vote, it implies a share of the vote that's lower than Jeremy Corbyn received in 2017, considerably lower. So a lot of people will ask, does this mean support for Keir Starmer, or does it mean that people just simply wanted to vote the Conservatives out?
The Lib Dems will take 61 seats according to the exit poll. Reform could win as many as 13, and the SNP look like they'll be reduced to 10 seats. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 1, Labour looks on course for a landslide victory in the general election. The exit poll suggests Sir Keir Starmer will become the new Prime Minister with 410 seats in the House of Commons. Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy explains why he thinks people have put their trust in Labour.
Our public services are nowhere near where they should be. Inflation is higher than it should be. Cost of living is high. We've got sewage in our waters. For all of those reasons, they're up for change.
The Tories' 14 years in power will come to an end. They're predicted to win in just 131 constituencies. All of the early results have gone the way of Labour, with former Justice Secretary Robert Buckland losing his Swindon South seat. Big names like Chancellor Jeremy Hunt and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps are likely to be voted out as well. Tory Minister Steve Baker says he expects to be swept away in the tsunami.
It is clearly a devastating result for us tonight. There's absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. But if you're saying existential in the sense of not coming back from it, no, I would reject that.
Both the Tory party's share of the vote and seat tally could be the lowest in the party's history. Reform could have 13 MPs at the end of the night. They've come second in some of those places already declared. The party's deputy leader, Dr David Bull, says they'll be looking at the vote share as well as the number of seats.
We believe that our vote share is much higher than the Liberal Democrats. We believe it's double that of the Liberal Democrats. And we believe, even though that is the case, we will actually get only a quarter of the seats. And therefore, if that is true, then people around the country will be saying our political system is broken.
Elsewhere, the Lib Dems are predicted to become the third biggest party with 61 seats. They're already declaring they're confident of victory in 12 seats. The SNP look to be having a bad night. The exit poll suggests they're losing all but 10 of their seats. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 2, Sir Keir Starmer will be the next Prime Minister, with Labour on course for a landslide general election win. The exit polls suggesting his party will claim 410 seats to the Tories' 131. That would be just short of Tony Blair's majority in 1997 and a worst ever result for the Conservatives. Rachel Reeves is in line to become the new Chancellor under a potential Labour government. She says reforming the economy will be a priority.
I think everybody recognises the huge scale of the challenge that will face any incoming government after the damage done by the Conservatives. Debt at almost 100% of GDP, taxes at a 70-year high, the first Parliament on record where living standards are lower at the end than they were at the beginning.
The Tories could lose many big names, including Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, Commons leader Penny Mordaunt and Defence Secretary Grant Shapps. Former Justice Secretary Sir Robert Buckland's the first Tory to lose his in Swindon South.
Do we value those who work to bring people together and who come into politics to do something rather than be someone? Or do we shrug our shoulders and accept that politics is a mere circus?
Stroud, Nuneaton and Darlington have all gone red. The Lib Dems have made their first gain from the Tories in Harrogate. The exit poll suggests they could have 61 by the end of the night. Elsewhere, Nigel Farage is hailing what he says will be a huge result for reform. The exit poll puts his party on around 13 seats.
There are two results in from the northeast of England that put reform on 30% of the vote. That is way more than any possible prediction or projection. It's almost unbelievable. And what does it mean? It means we're going to win seats, many, many seats.
The SNP could be reduced to just 10. Plaid Cymru and the Greens could win 4 and 2 seats respectively. Elsewhere, Theresa May has been given a place in the House of Lords. The former Prime Minister has been nominated for a peerage by Rishi Sunak. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 3, Labour's on course for a landslide general election victory, making Sir Keir Starmer the next Prime Minister. If the exit poll's correct, they'll win 410 seats to the Tories' 131. It would be the Tories' worst ever result. So far, Labour gains include Swindon South, Erewash, Telford and Blackpool South. The party's Ian Lavery's held on to Blyth and Ashington.
Why should people in different parts of this country have a life expectancy of 10 to 15 years more than people in my constituency here in Blyth and Ashington? We've got to get to the roots of this, and we've got to make sure that change means change.
Lee Anderson's become Reform UK's first elected MP, winning in Ashfield. He defected from the Conservatives earlier this year.
I said a few weeks back that there was going to be a reckoning on election night, and Ashfield, which is the capital of common sense, they are part of that reckoning. Now, this wonderful place, which I call my home, is going to have a massive say in how this country is shaped in the future.
The Tories were pushed back to 4th place. The exit poll made an uncertain prediction that Nigel Farage's party would win 13 seats, although 2 of those were Barnsley North and South, which have been held by Labour. The Lib Dems are also making gains, taking Eastleigh and Harrogate from the Tories. Party leader Sir Ed Davies easily held on to his seat in Kingston and Surbiton.
But what I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future.
The party is predicting it's about to gain around 50 MPs. They also claim they've taken the seats of Education Secretary Gillian Keegan in Chichester and Justice Secretary Alex Chalk in Cheltenham. Kilmarnock's the first result declared in Scotland, going to Labour. The SNP is predicted to have a bad night, potentially winning just 10 seats. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 4, a number of cabinet ministers have lost their seats in the past hour as Labour close in on a landslide general election victory. Justice Secretary Alex Chalk was the first to lose out as the Lib Dems took Cheltenham.
I dearly wanted to serve, not to hold office for office's sake, but because I passionately believe in public service and I have more to give. But you can't only love democracy when you win.
Defence Secretary Grant Shapps and Education Secretary Gillian Keegan also won't be returning to Westminster after being voted out. Labour have passed the 150 seats mark, with the exit polls suggesting they'll end up with 410 to the Tories' 131. Sir Keir Starmer's held his seat in Holborn and St Pancras, promising to serve with integrity.
To end the politics of performance, a return to politics as public service. The change begins right here because this is your democracy, your community and your future. You have voted. It is now time for us to deliver.
But Labour's Shadow Paymaster General Jonathan Ashworth's lost his seat to an independent candidate. They've also lost Islington North, where Jeremy Corbyn's now an independent. Nigel Farage has become an MP at his 8th attempt.
We are going to come second in hundreds of constituencies. How many seats we're going to win, I don't know. But to have done this in such a short space of time says something very fundamental is happening.
The Reform leader has been elected in Clacton, one of 4 constituencies that have now gone to his party. Elsewhere, the Lib Dems have made a series of gains, including in Cheltenham, Cheadle, Eastbourne and Stratford-on-Avon. The SNP's losing seats and could be reduced to just 10, according to the exit poll. Plaid Cymru's gained Innsmouth from the Tories for its first seat so far. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands. From the Sky News Centre at 5. Some breaking news. Labour has won the general election. It has more than the 326 seats needed for a majority. Rishi Sunak's conceded defeat.
The Labour Party has won this general election, and I have called Sir Keir Starmer to congratulate him on his victory. Today, power will change hands in a peaceful and orderly manner, with goodwill on all sides. That is something that should give us all confidence in our country's stability and future.
They're on course for a landslide victory. The exit poll suggests it'll take 410 seats in total. Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, is promising a future of national success under her party.
Today is our chance to turn the page and start a new chapter, to tackle the cost of living crisis and to make work pay.
And there's been a string of Conservative cabinet ministers who've lost their seats. Commons leader Penny Mordaunt's among them. Grant Shapps, Alex Chalk, Gillian Keegan, Lucy Fraser and Michelle Donlan have all been voted out, and more Tory heavyweights are at risk. Jeremy Hunt has just held on to his seat in Godalming and Ash. Elsewhere, Nigel Farage has finally been elected to Parliament at his 8th attempt. He's one of 4 Reform winners so far. The Liberal Democrats could be on course for their best ever result. They've made a series of gains from the Conservatives. The SNP leader, John Swinney's admitted his party may not even reach double figures.
Regardless of where we end up, this is a very difficult night for the Scottish National Party, and we need to look at this carefully, listen carefully to what the public are saying to us and begin the rebuilding of trust with the public in Scotland.
His party's lost more than 20 seats so far. And the Greens have won Bristol Central, taking it from Labour's former Shadow Culture Secretary, Thangam Debonair. That's the latest. I'm Faye Rowlands.
From the Sky News Centre at 6.
We did it!
Sir Keir Starmer told a rally in London that the sunlight of hope is shining once again after Labour won the general election.
You fought for it, and now it has arrived. Change begins now.
His party has more than 326 seats needed for a majority and are on course for a landslide. Rishi Sunak's promised an orderly transfer of power. The Prime Minister's seen a series of his party's biggest names voted out overnight. Grant Shapps, Penny Mordaunt and Gillian Keegan are among cabinet ministers who've lost their seats. But Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has defied expectations and won his seat of Godalming and Ash.
Across the country is a bitter pill to swallow for the Conservative Party. Some Conservatives will wonder whether the scale of our crushing defeat is really justified.
The Conservatives' final tally could be the lowest in its history, and they don't have a single seat in Wales. The Lib Dems are heading for their best ever tally, with more than 50 wins clocked up so far, including for leader Ed Davey, who told supporters he'd enjoyed every minute of the campaign.
But what I've loved most hasn't been the paddleboarding or the bungee jumping. It's been speaking to people here in Kingston and Surbiton and across the United Kingdom about the challenges they face and their hopes for the future.
Well, Nigel Farage has been elected as an MP in Clacton and Essex. The Reform UK leaders failed to win a common seat on 7 previous occasions, but he's one of at least 4 members of his party who will enter Parliament. In Scotland, John Swinney's conceded the SNP will struggle to reach double figures, but Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, has lost his seat to the Scottish National Party. And finally, there have been 3 successes for the Greens so far, including for both of the party's co-leaders. That's the latest. I'm Tim Jones. From the Sky News Centre at 7, Sir Keir Starmer says the country can now get its future back after securing victory for Labour in the general election.
Walk into the morning, the sunlight of hope, pale at first, but getting stronger through the day, shining once again on a country with the opportunity to get its future back.
His party now has just over 400 MPs. Its majority in the Commons will be more than 100. It's been a bruising night for Rishi Sunak. A record number of senior ministers have lost their seats. High-profile casualties include former Prime Minister Liz Truss, Grant Shapps, Gillian Keegan and Penny Mordaunt, although former Home Secretary James Cleverly will remain an MP.
We are no longer in government, and it's not just that. It's the nature of why that has happened. So we need to think about what our offer is to the British people, think about why this has happened.
Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey has been celebrating. They have 70 seats, their highest ever number. Meanwhile, it's been a disastrous night for the SNP in Scotland. The party is struggling to make double digits, losing most of their seats to Labour. Elsewhere, some of the smaller parties had good results. Reform UK has 4 MPs so far, including for leader Nigel Farage, with the party securing the third highest vote share across the UK, even ahead of the Lib Dems. Well, he's used his victory speech to declare he was coming for Labour.
What is interesting is there's no enthusiasm for Labour, there's no enthusiasm for Starmer whatsoever. In fact, about half of the vote is simply an anti-Conservative vote. This Labour government will be in trouble very, very quickly.
Elsewhere, the Greens have 4 seats, including for both their co-leaders, while in Wales, the Conservatives have been completely wiped out. In Northern Ireland, the DUP's lost 3 seats, including for Ian Paisley. That's the latest. I'm Tim Jones. From the Sky News Centre at 8, Sir Keir Starmer says change begins now after returning Labour to power for the first time since 2010. Later, he'll formally become the UK's next Prime Minister after his party's landslide victory, securing more than 400 of the 650 seats. It's been a terrible night for the Conservatives, with former PM Liz Truss and more than 10 prominent cabinet ministers losing their seats. Rishi Sunak conceded defeat just before 5 a.m, promising an orderly handover of power.
The British people have delivered a sobering verdict tonight. There is much to learn and reflect on, and I take responsibility for the loss.
There's also interesting detail about the share of the vote, which reflects party support across the UK. Despite Labour's Commons majority, its share is just around 34%, well below the 40% achieved by Jeremy Corbyn in the 2017 election, which he lost. And Reform UK, which only has secured 4 seats, has the third biggest share of the vote, ahead of the Lib Dems. Even so, Sir Ed Davies guided his party to a record number of seats and has thanked voters.
Many of them have turned to the Liberal Democrats, in some cases for the first time at this election. And we want to be your champions. We've listened to you, and we've heard you loud and clear.
Well, there was victory for Reform leader Nigel Farage in Clacton. He finally became an MP at the 8th attempt. Elsewhere, Labour gains were seen in Wales, where the Tories were wiped out, and in Scotland, where the SNP lost close to 40 seats. Scottish National Party leader John Swinney says they'll reflect on their results.
Regardless of where we end up, this is a very difficult night for the Scottish National Party, and we need to look at this carefully, listen carefully to what the public are saying to us, and begin the rebuilding of trust with the public in Scotland.
Meanwhile, Sinn Féin remains the largest party in Northern Ireland, where the DUP have lost 3 seats. That's the latest. I'm Tim Jones.